Have you ever wondered what it really takes to turn your vision into a reality? Hi, I'm Jessica, and welcome to Permission to Flow podcast. And in this episode, I take you deep behind the scenes of what it really took to create my YouTube podcast studio in my apartment. And what I will say is throughout the episode, I call it a podcast studio, but really this is all about visuals, right? It is, you could call it a YouTube studio or a video podcast studio or whatever you want to call it, but it is really catering to the visual element of what I've been doing. So the podcast may have existed for 2.5 years, but we are stepping in to the next generation or iteration of it and really focusing in on the visual element and catering to that. And that was really what this was all about, was how can I move into this next version of myself and this next version of what I've been creating. And I'm so excited for you to see like all the behind the scenes. I was taking videos and clips and all kinds of stuff while we were developing this entire space. And so I definitely recommend that if you're able to watch the video that goes along with this episode so you can really see all the like fun little clips of what went into making this space. And I will say that it was a labor of love. No, there is no doubt about that. And to me, I think that this is a perfect iteration of something that I really live by, which is this idea that the ends justify the means. And I think that so much of my life comes from that kind of idea where to me, it's like when I feel like there is this thing within me that I want to create, it's like I am willing to put in the effort, the time, sometimes a little bit of agony, let's be honest, to make it happen. And you're going to see that exemplified in this episode, that it really took there was a lot of stress going on. You know, I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, but it was worth it. And to see the completed space now and to see it transform from this blank wall to this completed, beautiful space has been nothing short of miraculous to me. And I will say that for anyone out there, it's like the ability to go, oh, it's so possible to have this crazy idea in my head become a reality. So I want you to see that in what the making of the studio was. It was really honing into that belief and that vision and letting it transform and morph over time and getting excited about it. You know, even after I shot the whole episode, I was still like tinkering and tweaking it and having fun with it, right? I ended up even painting over my light switch, and one of the switches is a little sticky now, but it's worth it to me. And I think that's the point, is that even in the struggles, it's like the thing that you're creating is worth it. It is worth the effort that it takes. And when you find yourself in that completed vision, there is nothing like it. All right, now without further ado, here is the making of my YouTube podcast studio. Hello, I'm Jessica, host of Permission to Flow podcast, and today is a little bit of a departure from our usual podcast episodes, and instead I'm going to take you through the making of this podcast studio. And I will say it was a bit of what's the word for it? It was an experience. I don't know what other words I have for it. But it took about 2 months, I would say, maybe an extra month if you include the time of deciding that I even wanted to build the studio. First off, I did not actually know if I wanted to do this. And it's interesting because I think there was a little part of me that always did. I ever since I started the podcast, I really wanted to be able to have a full-fledged podcast studio space. It was something that just seemed amazing. I would see all these videos of creators who had a dedicated space that was built for their podcast. And I was like, that would be amazing to have. And yet I think for a very long time, I kind of denied myself of that dream where I was like, well, I live in New York City. I have a very small apartment. They can't be done. I there was a lot of can't do it mentality going on in the background, and it just never seemed like the right time as well, where it just felt like maybe later. Maybe later I will be invested in this to the point where I want to do it. And if you haven't already, definitely go and check out my episode called Commit to Create, where I go into some of the lessons that went into the making of this and learnings from it. But today I'm really focused on just like what it took to make this happen. But I can't say that without saying this part where it was like, should I even do it? And so I spent a lot of time thinking that it was impossible or couldn't be done or it wasn't the right time or all these stories that were in my head that were saying, "Oh no, I don't think so." And at the time when I was really wanting to move forward on this, I was thinking to myself, "Okay, maybe I will rent out a space." And that would be a better option for me. And I went through a whole process of vetting that out first. And one of the things that I think is really important is kind of going down the path of looking at all your options. And that was a very important part of this process as well, where I went to scope out different studios. I talked to different people. I did a lot of research and scoped out so many different options. And it was this question of, well, do I want to go here? How much do I want to pay? All these different factors went into that. And as I said, I think I always had this feeling deep within me where I really wanted to be able to do a custom space. Like it just felt like such a cool thing to do. And I don't know, a little bit of a dream. And when all those studios that I was scoping out just did not seem to give me what I want. And granted, I think no matter what, you kind of there are always puts and takes to everything, right? Like even me doing this space has its own like pluses and minuses for sure. But the pluses were outweighing the minuses for making this space versus using a studio somewhere in the city. And mind you, I live in New York City, and renting out a studio space is quite expensive. So that definitely was factoring in as well. Anyway, so I eventually had this idea where I was like, you know what? I really want to make a studio space happen. But one of the main things that was kind of in my way was the fact that like the setup of my space was not allowing me to really create a backdrop in the way that you see right now. In reality, because mind you, this is my home, not and I live in a under 500 square foot New York City apartment. So there's not a lot of space to be working with here. And ever since I moved in, I had the configuration where my TV stand was where I'm sitting right now, and my couch is where my TV stand is now. And I will tell you, it is a funny little rigging that we have to do in many ways because we are working around my actual apartment and the fact that I do still happen to live in this apartment currently. But that being said, I was scoping out this idea of keeping it as it was and making like a backdrop or putting some kind of fold up thing behind the couch and shooting this way in the opposite direction of where I am right now. And I was kind of on the fence where it just felt like it wasn't quite giving me what I wanted. And I sleep in a loft that's up here onto the side. And what's cool about it is when you're laying in the loft and looking out this way, you can actually oversee the whole apartment. And I was kind of looking at it going, what if I wasn't so fixed on the way things are? If I started from nothing what would I want this space to look like? And it's interesting because I've been playing this kind of, I don't know, it's almost like putting puzzle pieces, or I imagine eh, those games where you can kind of move things around, or that's not the right word. I I imagine that I was in one of those, I don't know, like, on the computer where you could take your furniture and move one here and move one over there and whatever. And so I was doing that in my mind without actually drawing it out. And eventually I was thinking to myself, you know what? What if I put the couch against the wall, which then would give me wall space to play with, and move the TV stand into the middle of the apartment, which is a little funny, but it would serve a better purpose for the podcast studio. I no longer happen to have an apartment where I shoot a podcast. It's really that I live in a podcast studio now. And here's the thing is the other half of my apartment, which is on the other side of my TV stand, I had actually already moved all my furniture around on that side of my apartment to cater to the podcast as well, because my desk used to be against the wall and I switched my desk and my table to get them into a better setup. And if you watch all my other podcast videos where I have kind of the dark backdrop, that was kind of created from me changing all my furniture on that side of my apartment. So that's what I mean when I say, no, my podcast has literally taken over this entire space, and I firmly live in a podcast studio now. In any case, so I finally decided, hey, I'm going to move the furniture around. And I started kind of recruiting help because I was like, I can't really move all these things alone. So I got two of my friends, Ronnie and Steven, to come over one day, and the two of them helped me move my furniture around. And there is a funny little video of them trying to lift me on my couch, which was hilarious. But yeah, so the first stage of this whole process was just moving the furniture around and having the couch here and the TV stand over there. And after I did that, it started to become okay, now you have space to play with. And again, I think I was laying up in my little loft, kind of dreaming of what it could be like. And it's funny because what first happened was I thought about this idea of what if I put wallpaper on the wall? And I found this cool wallpaper that I liked. It kind of had this texture and was this beautiful blue green color. And I really liked it. So then I reached out to my handyman, Cameron, and I said, hey, Cam, do you think you could come over and help me hang up wallpaper? And he goes, Jess, I would love to help you, but I haven't hung up wallpaper in quite a while, and I don't want to mess it up for you. And so I looked at that and I went, okay, now what? Well, then, and here's the thing is, I think this is a good point that I'm going to make about this whole thing is, again, I have been playing around with this idea for 2.5 years since I started the podcast, in essence. And the thing is, up until now, I think I had a very limited perspective on like what was possible, what I could do, how I could change the space around. Like I kept leaving everything where it was for the most part. And I think the difference is when I was making the studio is I freed my mind of a lot of these shoulds or needs or whatever, where it was like, oh, you should have your TV against a wall. You should have things in these kind of configurations. Like I let a lot of that go in this process, and I let my mind just play. And that was one of the biggest things that allowed me to make this whole thing happen, is this sense of play. I realized that when I let go of, I basically like scrapped everything. I kept my same furniture because I was like, I mean, if I needed to, I would have changed it. But I was going with the schematic of here's the current things I have. How can I make it work? To get back to the painting, it was a very similar thing where I was looking at this wall and I was coming against this roadblock of, oh, Cameron can't do wallpaper. Now what? And suddenly my brain clicked and went, wait, we can paint the wall. And then suddenly my brain started to expand and go kind of wild with that idea and realize that not only can I paint the wall, I can have fun with the wall. Like there is so much more creativity that can go into a wall than can go into wallpaper or painting the wall, I mean. And it let me kind of create this freedom in my space, in my head of going, what if? And I started to play out this idea, and I think I was like laying up in this bed, like starting to imagine what is the possibility that could come if I free myself from having to find a wallpaper and instead get to design and play and let my creativity run wild with the idea. What then? And first off, I did really, in fact, love that wallpaper. And when I looked at it, I suddenly had this realization of wait, I paint. And granted, I usually paint about yay big, about a very small piece of paper size, but I am a painter just in my life. Like I love painting. It's like a hobby of mine. And I went, what if I painted the wall myself? And so I started to realize I could actually paint the same texture that was in that wallpaper because I really liked it. I liked how it kind of had this depth and these layers to it. And then from there, when I was playing around, I was like on Pinterest. I was going through all these different things, and I realized, oh, what would I like the design to be? And I started playing with these lines, and playing with this idea of like what would embody this idea of permission to flow. And I saw all these different designs that had different kind of like line patterns on it. And so I saved a bunch of them. I started playing with them. Started with multiple lines. I had different shapes, different patterns, like all these different ideas, and eventually came up with this pattern. So that was a whole endeavor of figuring out what I wanted it to look like. And so that was kind of what was playing around in my head. I was thinking about this idea of, hey, I want to try and imitate sort of the um the wallpaper that I had found and really liked. And I wanted to do a design and I wanted it to be gold because I don't know, I love that gold kind of symbolizing like it reminds me of the story that my teacher Sri Dharma Mitra often shares about how whatever comes from gold is always going to be gold. Gold, even if you turn it into a ring, if you turn it into a bracelet, if you turn it into a necklace, it is always gold. And the story is around this idea of like we are made from God or the universe, whatever you ascribe to. And therefore, you are part of God, right? You are part of the universe, and you are always part of that. And so I always love this kind of tie back to gold and this idea of it being a flowing kind of malleable element. That's how the design started to play out. And granted, it wasn't finalized because then it became, let's start making this happen. The first thing that happened was I went to Home Depot. I became best friends with Eddie that works there, whether he liked it or not, because I went there, I think 6 or 7 times in the span of a week. I was there every single day because here's the thing. I custom made all of the paint color aside from the gold with Eddie. So Eddie and I went through this insane process of trying to match the color that I really wanted because all the colors I was seeing were either too green or too blue and they just like weren't quite what I wanted them to be. And I spent many a painstaking hour with Eddie creating this wall color. I think I went to 2 or 3, I think it was like 3 times to actually even nail down the base layer color. And then I had to go back and create the layers colors. There's actually 3 different colors in this kind of blue-green wall. And yeah, so it was a whole process. And we spilled some paint. We had to go back. It was just a lot of time spent at Home Depot. Thank God Home Depot is pretty close to me because I would have had a lot of problems otherwise. But yeah, so I spent a lot of time with my friend Eddie at Home Depot, and the two of us custom made this paint color. And then one day Cameron came over and he helped me paint this wall, the base layer. And I did not know how much time, effort, and whatever would go into making the base layer. I'm very glad I had Cameron's help because it was a lot more than I thought it would be. I've never painted a wall before. As I said, I paint watercolor normally about this big, not a lot, and I certainly have never done anything on this scale, and I didn't want to mess it up. So Cameron came over. We had to tape the wall. We had to pull out some cords that were wrapping around the apartment. It was a whole production. While I was at Home Depot, I made a friend while mixing up my paints named Dalton. And Dalton gave me such great advice about how to actually do this and how to paint the wall and get all the layers I wanted. And so shout out to Dalton. Thank you. So in any case, Cameron came over and for a whole day we went wild setting this whole thing up and then painting, and very, very thankful for his help. I was trying to sponge on the layers at first, and it wasn't really working. And so I had to wait, I think it was 2 days. And then I actually went one day and started. What I did was all the texture on here was done by sponge. I had like a big sponge and a little sponge, and I literally just sponged on all this texture and then brushed some on there as well. And little tiny side note is that there's an infinity sign right here, if you can see, that I just sneakily wanted to add in there. So this is why it's more fun to paint than to put on wallpaper, is what I realized. Honestly, I can't wait to continue doing more wall murals because it was freaking exhilarating. So that's how the base layer of the wall went up, was with Cameron doing the base paint and then me coming over and sponging on all of the texture that you see here. And it was a whole process. I was up on a ladder. I was all over the place, like sponging this texture on and trying to keep it like loose and random. And then adding in, as I said, it's 3 different colors. So then adding on the other color onto it, it was a whole thing, but it was very fun. So that was the base layer. As far as the line is concerned, I wanted to wait for it until I had the sign because I wanted to think about painting the sign. I wanted to think about painting the line in service of the sign. So then I went down this rabbit hole of finding the sign. I went on Etsy. I looked for one that I liked, and it was only this one shop that happened to have this particular font. And I love this font because the outside of my apartment building that we are currently sitting in is actually an old Art Deco building. And I love that. And when I saw this font, I love that it also had this kind of Art Deco look to it. So it was kind of a no-brainer. I was like, that's the one. So I placed the order. And then came the horrible waiting period where I was waiting for this sign for a really long time. It took about a week and a half, I think it was. It's really challenging when you're doing this because it kind of puts a pause. It's like your creativity is flowing into this thing. And then when you hit a roadblock, it feels like your creativity is being blocked and stifled. At least that's what it felt like for me. And it was really challenging because I love being in my flow. I love creating. And suddenly I had to pause and I couldn't do anything because I was waiting on the sign. And as much as I would have loved, and mind you, it was like, I don't know, this was me. I didn't want to put my apartment back together just to pull it all apart again. So I was just living with it, just in chaos. And this went on for weeks because the sign didn't get here for, I think it was like maybe a week and a half. And by the time it got here, I was actually on vacation. So I was in San Diego. It arrived literally the day I got there, of course. And I had to just like sit and wait it out, which was fine because I wasn't here. I wasn't here living in the chaos. And that was better. Also, still frustrating. But I had to just go, okay, can't be done. Nothing I can do. Have to just wait. So I finally get back from my trip and the sign is here. And the thing is, now that I have the sign, I can at least scope out where I wanted to go and figure out the finishing the mural. So the first thing that happened was finishing this gold line before hanging up the sign. And the way that I did this is, again, I had kind of like my sketch that I had produced on my iPad. And what I did was I actually found ribbon in my apartment, which thank God I just have a million craft supplies. So I took the ribbon and I literally started to drape it on the wall, similar to the design that I had on my iPad, and put it like literally taped it all the way up and then played with it. Played with, do I like it here? Do I like it there? And it took a lot of me just like maneuvering and figuring it out before I found a way that I really liked the way it looked. And so that was step one. And then after I had all the ribbon up exactly where I wanted it, then I went in and actually started painting. And the way that I painted this was I would take a section of the ribbon off the wall and then I would paint that section and then do rinse and repeat through the whole thing because this is just me. I wanted to replicate the way that the ribbon fell. I wanted to have that kind of flowing twists and turn type of feeling to the gold line. I didn't want it to just be like a straight flat line. I wanted it to kind of have these curves to it in a similar way to the way a ribbon would actually fall. And that's why I really liked having that ribbon there, because I would look and see like how does the ribbon twist or where does it get more narrow, and I would replicate that. So that's what went into this gold line. And and I forgot to mention why I did this gold. Well, no, I talked a little bit about it, but here, okay, I said this in the other one, but the thing about that I really like about the gold line and why it became that gold line, I was telling you a little bit about the story with Dharma. But another thing is, like, to me, when I was thinking about this word flow, I was thinking about water and I was thinking about like a river. And so I imagined that the twists and turns of life, the twists and turns of a river flowing, I was imagining what is kind of, it's interesting because when I look at it, especially now, I don't even know if this was necessarily part of my inspiration, but something I think about when I look at it now is it's very much a representation of the creative process or the process of life. And it's my interpretation, I feel like, of what it takes to figure something out or move ahead on a project. It starts off where you don't know where you're going and you're like looping all over the place. Sometimes you're like literally going in a circle. That's why I included this little loop here. And there's all these ups and downs, but in general, like you're always actually moving up, even when it doesn't feel like it, or you're moving forward. And I think that that's why I wanted this to feel a little bit chaotic and also feel kind of like we're getting somewhere even when we don't know we're getting somewhere. And I like how this side of the mural feels more kind of chaotic and more all over the place. And this side feels like it's starting to get smoother. And you can't see it here, but the end of the line is much more kind of like rolling hills, I would say, where it's like, yes, we might have ups and downs, but it's a lot smoother of a ride than over here. So I see it as kind of this representation of so many different things, but especially this idea of like finding our flow, of finding our voice, finding our creativity. Like it represents so much to me as far as my own process, my own like way of how things have gone for me. And I love this idea where yes, things get easier over there, but then you start something else and you come right back here and you go through all this mayhem all over again. But to me, it's all about embracing that process, embracing that flow, and allowing the current to take you in many ways. So that is a little bit of what I see this gold line as representing. And it was really important to me for it to kind of start low and end high, because no matter what, I feel like that's what I was saying earlier, is that even when we feel like we're going all over the place and it's looping and chaotic and whatever, like we are still moving forward. And I wanted that to come across in this drawing. So that is, in essence, why it became this gold line. And at one point, there were multiple lines. Like I went through so many iterations, but I eventually just found this like one simple line to be what just felt right, and what really represented what I was going after the best. And I had a little fun with it, where, because again, I held up the sign, like I marked off where the sign was going to go before I painted the line, because I wanted the line to also interplay with the sign. And I was having a little fun. You can see up here where like there's like a curve in the sign that matches like the curve in the line, and I wanted the line to like flow through the sign as well. So yeah, there was a lot of thought that went into this one line, I will say, but I don't know, I had so much fun with it. So I put all the ribbon up, I painted it, and I finally could put up the sign. And then I had to recruit in Cameron along with two of my doormen who came in as well. Eddie and Danny came over and helped us really get the sign up, because I did not trust myself to hang this up by myself. I also don't have power tools. So it was really, really helpful for them to come in. I feel like I was calling people in left and right, because it was like, okay, I can't quite do this thing. I can do a lot on my own. I did all my painting by myself, and it was funny because sometimes the painting was happening at like really odd hours. I love to do things at like really strange times sometimes. That is the plus side of turning your studio into a podcast studio, is that you can wake up and start painting. You can paint until you're about to go to sleep. And I did both of those things. Sometimes, yeah, it was literally because I had to, yeah, I did this. I painted this after I had a phone call with my friend, Maria. And then we got off the phone and I just had this gust and was like, I just want to paint it right now. And that's when this painting went up. And then the next morning I was like, I need to put on the final coat. And I was like, I did it at like 7 a.m. one day. Strike of madness or strike of genius, who's to say? But this is where we are. Anyway, that's how the wall came together. That's how the sign came together. It really is, not was. It really is living out a dream for me. I only have one setup right now, but I have like full studio lights up in here. I got these mic stands that can put in my Shure microphones into. All of the other stuff started to come together at the same time as the backdrop and everything. I will say I was so resistant to buying studio lighting because I was like, oh my God, takes up so much space and everything, but it all worked out. I'm obsessed with them. It really does make it pop. So definitely was worth the investment and the space that it takes. And thankfully the one that I got comes in like a little container and it's not too bad. And then the final pieces was that was changing out this couch cover, because I had one that had a pattern on it and it was a little too busy. So I bought a different couch cover and I bought these little side tables. And again, that was a late Sunday night this past Sunday. They had arrived and I suddenly had a lot of gusto and decided I was going to build these side tables by myself. So it was literally right here on my carpet, right in front of this couch, and I built out these little side tables. But to say, I really like to get my hands dirty and pick up a lot of new skills and build things and figure things out. This is a creation of my imagination, and I think what is really cool about it is this ability to go and have these ideas in your mind and go, I want to make this thing happen. I don't know how. How can I release myself from the barriers and the blockages that are telling me it can't be done and open myself up to the possibility? That is the essence, I think, of what created this entire studio. And I think the other biggest thing is just having fun with it and playing and being able to kind of have that childlike wonder of when you have a blank canvas, you never know what you will create. And I love that because this literally was a white wall before, and I didn't have anything hanging on it. It was a completely blank canvas. And it was funny because, especially when I was painting the gold line, I don't know why, but it got me in such a childlike mood where I was a little bit terrified because I've never painted on such a large scale. And I was like, oh my God, what if I mess up? But I was so giddy the whole time where I was like, this is so much fun. You don't get the opportunity to paint on such a large scale every day and to be able to really put my mark on something, be able to live into my creation. It was something really special. Yeah. It's really cool being able to sit here now with it done. There were definitely moments in the middle of there where I wanted to pull my hair out, especially while I was waiting for the sign and going, oh my God, can this be done yet already? And there were so many moments in the middle of that where I was just feeling so incredibly blessed and feeling so lucky that I get to be in my creation. And as I said earlier, it's just kind of the coolest thing when you get to cook something up in your mind. Like it is, I've described this as being like in a fever dream because this was just a dream to me. This was something where I literally was just laying in my bed, imagining the possibility, imagining what could it be like to change this space into a podcast studio? What could it be like if I painted on this wall? What could it be like if I moved this piece around or did this and all that? It was just sitting in my imagination, watching it step by step, layer by layer, piece by piece, build out and starting to see that come to life. I don't know. It was so fun, and even through the headaches and all the turmoil and the chaos and craziness, I think there was so much inside of me that was like a little kid and really just relishing in the creation and my imagination and the joy that came into making this a reality. So thank you so much to all the people that helped me along the way. It was definitely a big group effort, and I certainly did not do this alone. And I'm so appreciative of everyone who stepped in and helped me make my dream a reality. It came out way better than what my imagination even had scoped out, which I think is really freaking cool. That is the making of the podcast studio. I have talked for way too long. It was a full scale production up in here creating this. It was a lot of late nights, early mornings, and all around chaos. It was all worth it. I think that to have this space to be able to now shoot in it like I'm doing right now and be able to really live into the creation and have the space done. I don't know, there's nothing like it. And I'm so excited to see what this next phase of Permission to Flow podcast and the YouTube channel, what is going to come of me having really, as I say in the other video, committed to the bit and built out my space to really be a podcast studio, because that is what this really is to me. And I don't know, it's just, it's been really cool. I've been sharing a lot on social media about the making of all this, and I've seen it inspire a lot of other people being like, oh my God, I can't wait to do this myself. A lot of my podcast friends and whatnot. And I think to me, it's always fun to to be in my own creation and also to inspire others to be in their own creation. So I hope that watching this and seeing how this came to life can inspire you to commit to your bit and build out the thing that you want to do and be able to make your imagination, your creativity come to life in a similar way. Thank you so much for watching this making of the Permission to Flow podcast studio. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Permission to Flow. If you enjoyed this episode, then hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. And if you want to learn more about working with me, then go to my website, jessicahuangcoaching.com. Link is below. And remember, the world needs what you will create.